Jedi Fallen Order, in my opinion, is one of the best Star Wars games that has ever been made, and still to this day I absolutely love it. I'm actually replaying through it at the moment, but with that being said, I do think there is quite a bit of improvement that could be made through that game, and with Jedi Survivor coming out most likely early to mid next year, I wanted to go over today a few things that I think I would love to see within Jedi Survivor, essentially touching on a few improvements and additions to the game that I think could really take it to that next level. Now, just quickly before we get into it, I wanted to quickly touch on a few things. Firstly, for those who don't know, I do have a Patreon, and with all the Star Wars shows coming out on Disney Plus over the next year, and all the shows that have come out over the last year or so, I've been doing full episode reactions to those on my Patreon. Obviously, just recently covering Kenobi, and I will be doing that for every show that comes out in the future. So I just wanted to quickly shout that out to you guys. I know a lot of people aren't aware of that, and if you guys are interested in that, be sure to head to the description and check out the Patreon. There are not only the reactions, but a bunch of other little benefits as well, and it does help me continue putting out content here on YouTube. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on quickly is the Clips channel, which I've set up over the last few months. We have just hit that big 1K subscribers, and if you guys aren't subbed to that channel, be sure to go and check that one out. I do much the same of what I do on this channel, but just in, I guess, shorter form content over on that Clips channel. So once again, the link to that is down in the description. Be sure to go and check both of those out. But with that being said, guys, let's get stuck right into the video. So like I said, Fallen Order was an amazing game, and in my opinion, it was definitely worthy of being a contender for Game of the Year in 2019, or technically 2020, because it actually missed the mark in 2019. It was a really solid game, and I think it is honestly the best Star Wars game that we've ever received, or at least up there in that sort of top 3 to top 5. But with that being said, there is definitely a lot of stuff that they could improve on. It was obviously their first attempt at a Star Wars game of that nature, and so I wanted to go over a few things that I think would really take it through that next level and potentially put it in that category of winning Game of the Year. Now, the first thing that I wanted to touch on for this one is to do with the replayability of the game. Now, I don't think the first game had poor replayability, because I have actually played that game 6 times from start to finish, and I'm currently, like I said, playing through it again just in my spare time. So technically I'm playing it through for the 7th time now. So I don't think it has bad replayability, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to play it that many times. There's not many games that I've played through that many times, but I do think they can definitely still improve on that. For example, the skill tree in Fallen Order, that was, it was pretty decent. It had a lot of options, but essentially by the end of the game, you pretty much had the entire skill tree filled out, and at the end of the day, everyone's skill tree was essentially the same. There was maybe a few little differences, because I think you couldn't quite unlock every single unlock there, but for the most part, all of our skill trees would have been pretty similar as we were playing through the game. Now, I think with the addition of some new gameplay styles and stuff like that, they really could sort of flesh out that skill tree and allow you to actually really craft Cal to be a different character depending on how you want to play the game. So maybe one time you can be really heavily focused on the Force and you're not quite as strong with your saber, but you're a really strong Force user and you get an extra bunch of abilities and stuff like that. Or you could do the opposite and focus more on your saber skills and be a little bit weaker with the Force. And then even delving deeper into that, you could actually have a bunch of different stances and combat techniques and stuff like that, which they've actually touched on in an interview on StarWars.com. Stig Asmussen mentioned that they are sort of working on trying to have a few more stances in the game and stuff like that. So that is definitely something that I think we could see, but I think that would really add to the game to add some genuine replayability to where you can play through the game once and finish it, and it's a really fun way to play, but then you can actually start again and essentially build Cal out to be a completely different type of Jedi, and so your second playthrough will actually be fairly different from your first playthrough. Now, another way that they can go into that even further is allowing for a little bit more sort of exploration and side quest type stuff. Now, obviously in the first game, it was a fairly linear game. There was certain elements of exploration that you could do, finding the stim packs and fighting those legendary creatures and stuff like that. There was different stuff to do, but for the most part, it was a fairly A to B type of game. You just followed the path that the game gave you, and even the areas that you could explore, they were even fairly linear. It wasn't like go and find these absolutely crazy places, because if you kind of went off to the side of the main path, there was really only one other path, if that makes sense. So I think adding a little bit more of those sort of side quests and expanding the map a little bit more and stuff like that, I think that would really add to the replayability, so that maybe the first time you play, you just want to finish the story, but then the second time you play, maybe you do want to really go and explore every planet and finish every side quest and stuff like that. So those are some elements that I think they could really improve on. I don't think they were bad by any means in the first game, but there is always room for improvement, and I think these are some areas they definitely could improve on. Now, the next point, and this kind of touches touches on something that I just mentioned about the maps and sort of expanding those maps. I would absolutely love to see a bit more of a sort of open world element in this game. Now, it's never going to be a genuine open world game. That's just not the type of game that the Jedi series is going to turn out to be. But hear me out on this one. They mentioned leading into Fallen Order that they took a lot of inspiration from games like Dark Souls, some of those more linear map designs and the boss fights, as well as the meditation spots is sort of similar to the campfires in Dark Souls. So there was a lot of inspiration taken there. Now, I'm sure you guys have all heard of Elden Ring, which is made by the same people who made Dark Souls, and Dark Souls was never an open world game. It was always a pretty linear game. There are always different paths and stuff like that, but for the most part, it was very similar to Fallen Order, where it was a bit more A to B. Now, earlier this year, the development company that made Dark Souls, called From Software, they actually came out and made a new game called Elden Ring, and it was very similar to Dark Souls and those type of games where it was very brutal and very, there was a lot of big boss fights, and there was certain parts of the map that were a little bit linear, but they essentially added the open world element to that game, and that is what made Elden Ring such an amazing game. And honestly, in my opinion, it is one of the best games ever made, if not the single best game ever made. And so it just goes to show that you can expand upon a fairly linear type of game and expand that into an open world type of game, and it doesn't really take away from what made that game strong in the first place. So like I said, I don't think they'll ever make it a genuine open world game. I think that's probably asking a little bit too much, just because, yeah, that's not really their forte, and it would be a drastic change from Fallen Order. But I do think they could really expand upon that and keep it as still a relatively linear type of game, but just add a little bit more of that open world element to where there is some genuine exploration that you can do, and instead of just following the main path, you can genuinely just go around and be in these big open areas that you don't have to take one path to get from A to B. There's multiple different paths to get there. So I really do think that would be a massive improvement to the game. Whether I think it happens, I'm not too sure. I'm probably not holding out hope that will happen, but I think that would definitely be a massive improvement on Fallen Order. Now, the last thing on the list here, and this one is a little bit more insignificant compared to the other two, but I do still think it is relatively important because it is what we expect from Star Wars, and this one is improved graphics. Now, I don't think the first game looked bad by any means. I think it looked pretty much as you would expect for a game that came out in 2019, but it was maybe just a tiny little bit underwhelming compared to some other games that had been out in that period. And with Unreal Engine 5 now being out, I think they could really expand upon that and make this game be one of those games that you just look at and you go, holy shit, this is actually real, because that's something that in Star Wars has kind of always been the case. Now, I know a lot of the more recent Disney Plus shows, they don't look quite as good as the movies and stuff like that, but for the most part in the Star Wars franchise, it has kind of led the path in terms of making things look really realistic. These days, obviously, the prequels don't look all that good compared to what we probably thought they did growing up, but for the time, that was leading the path for CGI. Say what you will about the sequels, but the sequels looked absolutely amazing, and I think that us as the Star Wars fan base, we have just kind of come to expect that Star Wars is generally going to look really good. So I think they can sort of do the same thing there with the game. It's the same sort of thing when you look at Battlefront 2. That game looked absolutely amazing, and even Battlefront 2015 as well, which arguably looked even better. It is a very small thing for me. I don't think graphics define a game or anything like that, but it is one of those little quality of life changes that when you're playing a Star Wars game and it looks really realistic, it always just adds a lot to the immersion. So I think it's kind of an obvious one, because obviously it will look better than the first one that's coming out 3 years later, or technically even 4 years later, so it definitely will look better than the first one, but I hope that they really push those boundaries and use Unreal Engine 5. I'm not sure if that's confirmed yet or not, but I definitely think that would add a lot to the immersion of the game. That is going to do it for my thoughts on what I would love to see from Jedi Survivor though, guys. I'm keen to hear your thoughts though, so leave a comment down below letting me know if you agree or disagree with what I said, as well as your own stuff that you would like to see implemented into the game. Now, I'm also going to be doing I guess, what I don't want to see in Jedi Survivor. That will be going up in just a few weeks from now, so expect a sort of follow-up to this one. And like I said at the start of the video, be sure to check out the Patreon and the Clips channel. Both the links to those are down in the description. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and may the Force be with you always.